Captain Picard practices his fencing fun. The Blue Parrot Cafe serves some blue concoctions. And Deanna Troi knows all about the Zanza Men's Dance Palace. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello, hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we're doing a review of Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 1, Episode 23, We'll Always Have Paris, written by Deborah Dean Davis and Hannah Louise Shear, directed by Robert Becker. This was April 30th, 1988. Where were you? By the way, special thanks to Grandpa One, aka Tim Baum, for sponsoring this entire season. We have a very special guest today. Can you believe it? One of the writers of the episode, Deborah Dean Davis. Hello, how are you today?
Hello, nice to see you. I'm great.
Beautiful.
To answer your question, I'm just great. I'm not in Paris, but I'm great.
You're enjoying a beautiful day in LA, though.
Yes. Roses.
You always have Paris.
Well, let's just jump into this. First of all, thank you so much for joining us. This is wonderful to have you. This is your only Star Trek credit, writing credit. Can you please tell us how this came about?
DC Fontana invited me before the show even got started, and she asked me to come in and go into the new set, the new ship. She wanted to know, did it make you feel like you're on the Enterprise, And I was at Paramount a lot because I had started my feature career. I was writing a lot of feature films. And but I was so honored for her to ask me to do that I, of course, went over there. And I went into the ship, and I swear to God, those doors went, and I thought, we were in the, I felt like it so much. I was like, really, I went crazy, and they all got so excited. So that was, I thought, going to be my only thing with Star Trek. And I was happy about even being involved like that. But then Roddenberry asked for my ideas. And I actually had, and I think as a writer, a lifetime writer like myself, being able to sit down with him and discuss my ideas was, a moment, a seminal moment in my life, So he liked some of my, but I was writing for Meg Ryan. I was writing movies.
Wow.
So then one of those ideas was We'll Always Have Paris. And he really wanted to do that. So Hannah called me and she said, I have the flu. I don't feel well. This is your, Mom, is there some reason? And I said, no, I'd be honored to have a Star Trek credit, And so I'm a fast writer. Don't tell anyone. So I said yes, and I was doing what I was doing with the features anyway, and I was at Paramount anyway, and I just said, I'm going to do this because why would anybody say no to that, So that's how it happened, and that's why, and it's my last television credit, I believe, because no, wait, they asked me. I wrote so many Night Riders. The first season, 5 of the first 12, and this is such a weird thing for show business. When that show went off the air, they called me and said, will you write the last one? We want you to write it. And I did that one. So it was my last television thing. And what a great way to go out.
And everybody at home, sorry, Cirroc, I know you were going to say something, just real quick to let you know what Deborah has done in the 80s. It's pretty much like every show that you heard of in the 80s. The Incredible Hulk, Fantasy Island, The Fall Guy, Knight Rider, Magnum PI, and so on. So many cool things. It's like a who's what of TV. Sorry, but you were saying, Cirroc?
No, Deborah, I really like this episode because it kind of establishes something that we get to know Picard for throughout his career, and that is his fragility with women and his relationship situations. And my question is, what conversation did you have with Gene about developing that backstory or creating that identity for you?
That's a great question. And, by the way, I mean, you guys are doing this show, so the Prime Directive? Really? Are you fucking kidding me? I mean, how are you supposed to write anything with that Prime Directive? So I think that's why I went into this, went to a place that I go to often in my writing, which is love. Picard, what a great protagonist, but we didn't see that side. So I thought, this has got to happen. And, did the homage to Casablanca, basically, because they can't be together. And there's got to be a good reason for that, because he's too fabulous for words, right? So and that's where I came up with that, and I thought, that's not messing with the Prime Directive. It's the only way I could think to to actually elevate the show, which I like to do, and not mess up Mr. Roddenberry's vision, his vision and his version of how the world should be. So that was it. It was about love. And actually the Magnum I did was too, and that was harder to do because he's the sexiest guy on TV and they wouldn't let him fall in love.
Tom Selleck?
So,
yep.
Yeah, I was the only one that I gave him, he got hit his head and he didn't know who he was.
Perfect.
So that's how, and it was a very different Star Trek thing too, as there's not many like that.
Well, did you pull from something in your life? Did you have, a missed connection, or your reaction says probably maybe more than once even, but what did you pull from?
I've been married and divorced 4 times. So, and in between those, there have been others. I love love, but I'm also an extremely independent woman. So, do I relate to Picard? Yes. And the word soulmate, I don't remember the first time I heard the word soulmate, but I thought, wow, that's true. And there are people that you meet in your life, and you don't have to even have a long relationship with them or be married to them or, even have sex with them or anything like that, but they stick with you. And there are things that make you remember them. And it's always fondly, it's always an uplifting feeling, because that's what love is, and you don't say no to that. If you want to get the most out of your life, you don't say no to that. Even if they're dead and you just want to spend the day thinking about them. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
I have a question about the Janice Mannheim character, the main love interest in this. And
I forgot the last name. I haven't watched it for a very long time. Mannheim, I love that name.
There was a sense that I got from the way this character was portrayed that this type of woman that she was playing was kind of, I would say, subservient and willing to sacrifice herself for her husband in this case. A sacrifice that Picard thought would make him ordinary, as you put it. This kind of woman is more of a stereotype of the kind of woman that men fantasize about having, per se, at least in that time period, and not as independent and vocal as somebody like yourself. And
Well,
so
she wasn't me, she's
right.
not. I wasn't writing her from my perspective. I was writing him from my perspective, and she did that for a good cause. So that's more of a Joan of Arc, actually. It wasn't for him. Wasn't that clear? I don't remember. That should have been.
No, it was clear. It was clear, but when you frame it in a way that you say that you were writing Picard from your perspective, that lets me know that that's like as you were describing the kind of point of view that you have, and so that's the kind of interesting dynamic that I think seeing that perspective coming from a woman who is independent and who believes in love, but also has this kind of perspective that Picard has. I think that's an interesting dynamic to have in the back of your mind as I'm watching this episode.
Emily Bronte was a woman, and she wrote Heathcliff.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. I mean, Heathcliff was her character in Wuthering Heights. Back then, they had to change their names to men's names to get published. Now, I think it's time that people understand that a writer, no matter what their genitalia is empathetic to everyone. That's why we can write serial killers. We're not serial killers. We can write children. I haven't been a child for a very long time, but I keep a child within me, So yeah, she was dedicated to the cause. I'm dedicated to the Writers Guild cause, the strike, because I've been a writer my life. But I'm not like I don't have her level of Joan of Arc. That's she wanted to be with Picard.
Yeah, she did, and she was upset about that lie to me scene. Kind of, I really enjoyed that exchange between them.
What was the
way
one?
it was written?
You remind me of it.
Well, she says, "Well, why didn't you show up to the cafe?"
The cafe.
And he says, "I was afraid." And she's like, "Oh no, please don't do that. I was hoping you would lie,
Yeah.
And that's when he came up with, I was dazed and confused. I went to the wrong cafe. I got the days mixed up, and I went to the wrong place. And then she said, "Oh yes, and it was raining. You couldn't find a cab." And
he shakes his head.
Yes, and I really love that dialogue, just because once again, based on the empathy thing, she was saying essentially, be nice to me in this moment, and don't make it about you. Yeah.
Give me a story I can wrap my heart around and live with.
Yeah.
And this is this. I mean, everybody. It doesn't matter. Everybody has experienced love and love lost, and it's just such a human thing. It's almost like necessary. Like it gives you your joints away so that they don't hurt anymore. It gets things going in you. And I think that's why when that was it was the one that I wanted to write.
Well, Deborah, you mentioned the writer's strike. Wasn't there a writer's strike going on right around that time?
Absolutely. This has been my third or fourth strike.
And did that affect this at all? I don't know the exact timeline of it, but I think it was around that time.
Where's Hannah when we need her? She's the person who I don't even know what day it is. Sometimes I call Hannah and say, what day is it? And she says, oh, yeah, Sunday happened 2 days ago. That's okay. So you said 1988, and I went, wow.
Mm.
I was at the strike at Paramount. They invited us because of Star Trek. And they said, any of the writers, please come. And Hannah couldn't come. And so I went. And that guy, Brent
Spiner?
Yeah. The guy that played Data, he was walking with me, and somebody was standing next to me. It was a wide sidewalk, and I didn't know the person, and they were talking a lot, but not engaging. And I turned to Brett, and I said, what is he saying? And he said, he's reciting We'll Always Have Paris. He's reciting your script.
Wow.
And I was like blown away. I mean, he was a fan, and he had memorized We'll Always Have Paris. And I was, I said, you may have to hold me up for a minute. Like, wow, that's amazing. And he goes, yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Sounds like Star Trek fans.
Yeah.
They like to memorize things.
They memorize it. And I didn't recognize the scene, you just were talking about the Writers Guild. That was one of the weirdest moments I've had on online.
Wow.
Yeah, you had some very good lines. I mentioned earlier where you said life with me would have somehow made you ordinary. And Picard's response was, am I that transparent? Which I thought was just really great writing. Mm-hmm. There's another thing that you touched on in this episode conceptually. And it is something that, as most things in Star Trek, end up becoming part of reality. And this is the idea of this professor, in this case, dedicating his life to opening some dimension of some sort. Finding the power of this, these gravitational pull of planets and stars, and using that energy to essentially open a dimension. And then he found himself trapped in between this dimension and another dimension, which he could not articulate what it was like. I thought that was another great thing, because sometimes things are beyond words. But that's a concept that now has been used, because this was in '88. That same kind of concept has been used in movies like Contact with Jodie Foster. Mm-hmm. Just a bunch of movies. And it's actually been realized to some extent, at least in a conspiracy type of way, with a particle collider that was invented in Switzerland, where people are concerned about this same kind of rip in interdimensional time and space. And so this concept has actually materialized in a real form of a conversation in the public. How do you feel about that?
I think it's amazing. I think that sometimes we write things that happen, and sometimes we understand things not in an Einstein way, where we can do an actual, what do they call them, theorem, or and prove it that way. But again, I'm going to go to the empathy part. That is never ending. That is not definable. So when you go there as a writer, these are things that happen, that come to you, and they don't come to you. That makes it sound like you're just writing, and then what if this happened? And maybe it looks stupid, but there's ways of making it better. Because all you have to do is research, the theory of motion, all these different things, and just start looking at actual math. But if that happened, then that could happen. It's possible. And Star Trek thing wasn't a physics class, so we didn't have to
prove your theories.
Yeah, you could just go. And I think that, when I see the thing about like the Switzerland, the particle thing, I love that stuff. I just think it's interesting, and I don't understand it. But yeah, that's how many, not Einstein, who's the one that did the theory of motion? Kills me. It's like the number one thing, the two thing, three thing, four thing. It's Newton's theory of motion. I mean, he's got not just one theory, but like a lot of them, and they're being used today with little tiny satellites riveting off of asteroids to see what they could do to maybe change the direction of an asteroid. That's really happening now. I think it's interesting. It's not a hobby.
Yeah.
I think burying your bananas in your flower bed and having that be enough to feed all the flowers, I think that's fucking fascinating. So, it's hard not to get me excited. So, we just went there because
Deborah,
he had to be so great, that guy, Mannheim.
There were a couple more firsts that I noticed as well. And you keep mentioning Mannheim, great name. I did wonder if you got that name from somebody, because I know sometimes writers will be like, oh, it's my ex. Oh, we need a villain's name. I'll use my ex-wife's last name or something like that. But did you pull that from anything?
I only did that once, and I did it on a toe tag of a dead body.
Oh, wow.
I don't remember what show it was, but it was somebody I didn't like. But no, Mannheim, I think it was the word man, and I think Heim, I can't remember what that means in German. I think it was, like a great man.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that was, we gave him a name of why she's going to stay with him. Okay. Because, I would have stayed with Picard.
Well, what I wanted to ask you, especially...
And then I would have divorced him because of his prime directive.
Right.
But you had, there were a couple more firsts I noticed in this episode when watching it. Ooh. One was that this felt like the first episode that used data properly. He has these special powers in that, hey, if there's no oxygen, no problem. Hey, if there's lasers, he's got the best chance. You actually used this. This felt like the first episode in which data was used, properly. And then in many subsequent episodes after this, episodes do it all the time. Yeah. And then in other series as well.
You just explained why he walked with me. I didn't know why he was walking with me.
Maybe.
I didn't realize that they weren't utilizing him before. I mean, I think that he's a great character.
Not in that way, yeah.
Not in that individual way where his unique set of skills would be perfectly fitted for the assignment, which is what this case was.
Yep, he's a Swiss Army knife. And then the other first was...
He had a Swiss Army knife? No. Did he really? That would be my dad.
He is one, figuratively speaking. He can do anything.
I see what you're saying. He can do anything.
But the other first was, this was the first time that I felt that I saw Patrick Stewart being comfortable with the dialogue and comfortable in the role. I mean, he still plays a captain of a spaceship, a starship out 400 years in the future, beautifully and great and all that. But when he was in that cafe in Paris, there was something about him that was much more comfortable. And when he was talking to the lady, he seemed so much more relaxed. And it was like, boom, right there. He's comfortable. He gets the dialogue better than he got the previous 23 episodes of dialogue. And I wonder if it was just because it was a little bit more real, or if it was a little bit more Shakespearean, which is more in his wheelhouse. But whatever it was, you wrote a script and a dialogue that I felt like he was just sliding into like an old comfortable pair of slippers. Perfect for him.
That's wonderful. That's such a nice compliment. Thank you. Thank you. It's, Shakespeare is really ridiculously emotional, and so are we as human beings. And I think that's why I put all my characters in everything I ever write and do. I put them through hell because for that reason. Because all of us, every person I ever meet, people have a hard time. People have they miss people. They're people have problems, and that's our audience. And so you want to give them a hero, but you want that hero to have a piece of them in him, so that they can almost feel like him. That they can say, well, he's strong. He's going to go on, even though this happened. And my dad was like 75, and when he wanted to move a piano out of the house, and he said, I got to get someone to help me. My mom said, are you going to lay down and die or move the piano? And he was 75, and he figured it out. He figured it out, and he got the piano moved. That's the family I come from. So, there's a lot of people who lay down and die, and you don't have to. Bad things happen to all of us, and it hurts, and you move on, and sometimes you move on to do something better or more important. And in this show, that was always the feeling in Star Trek that I always got, was that they, no matter what was happening, they were doing something for good, making things better. And it's great that it's such a popular show, because we all need to remember that. We need to remember, it may be hard, but I'm going to do the right thing, the good thing. And I love that you said he was so comfortable. I never met him. I walked through a hall, and we passed in a hall, and I can't remember where this hallway was, somewhere probably at a studio.
Who is this?
Picard.
Patrick Stewart.
What's his real name?
Patrick Stewart.
Yes. And I've never met him. And he nodded, and I said hello, and have a good day. He said, have a good day. I mean, it was that was it. I didn't say, we'll always have Paris. Because it was kind of perfect.
He would have loved that, actually, to know
I
that.
know, but
I want to give you a compliment also on another aspect of this story that I really enjoyed. I love when writers use kind of a double entendre in their writing, and in my opinion, the idea of the deja vu like time lapses correlated very well with the deja vu occurrence of this meeting in Paris, kind of reliving that again and putting closure to it. I thought that's a great way to take your plots and your A and B storylines and cross them over with similar themes. So I just think this episode was fantastically written. And I just want to compliment you on how the pace and the flow was. It was so enjoyable to watch.
Hannah had a fever. She had She had
Wow.
a fever. I'm thinking that probably had something to do with it being so good. And she knew knows that show so well. The holodeck. Yeah. I just hope it wasn't like a flashback in a prom dress. I just wanted it to be the metaphor for relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when you said Meg Ryan, it just put a lot of things in perspective for me when I replay the episode in my head. I think of a romantic kind of Harry Met Sally type of
yeah, exactly.
feel to this episode. Yeah.
We worked together on two things, and she's a great person, and she's like the opposite of me. She's great at math. I mean, you wouldn't think. You'd think, oh, she's Meg Ryan, and no, I was like Meg Ryan, and she was, really, really, she's so smart. Yeah. I think Michelle did a great job on the thing. I was really happy with what she did.
Well, Deborah, this has been so cool. We're just about out of time here, but we really appreciate you giving us your insights and being so fun with it. Before we hit record, everybody at home, she was having us in stitches already. So she is tons of fun, and we appreciate you taking us on a walk down memory lane as well with the writer's strike from back then and how things were back in '88. But we really appreciate you taking the time. We appreciate you writing this episode and everything that you do. Thank you so much, Deborah.
Thank you both so much for having me.
Mm-hmm. All right.
My pleasure.
Everybody at home. There you go. You got it. Perfect. Boy Scout.
He does it
Isn't
perfect.
that the Boy Scout thing? Everybody at home, stick around. We will be right back on the seventh rule. Well, hi there, everybody. Welcome back to the seventh rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk. You know what we're doing. We'll always have Paris on Star Trek The Next Generation. Deborah was awesome. So cool having her. Here are the trivioids of the week, everybody. They are as follows. The Enterprise is en route to Sorona 8 for some well-deserved shore leave. Captain Picard practices his fencing fun. Dr. Paul Mannheim needs help. 15 years ago, Dr. Paul Mannheim went off to work on experiments related to nonlinear time. Captain Picard bangs a towel on his lap for some reason. I don't know if you noticed that. That was weird. The Enterprise received communications from the freighter Lalo as well as a farming colony on Koltar 4. The Mannheim effect is becoming more pronounced. Captain Picard got the days confused. He thought it was Tuesday when it was Wednesday. He went to the Café Moulin instead of the Café des Artistes. The Blue Parrot Cafe serves some blue concoctions. Deanna Troi knows all about the Zanza Men's Dance Palace. Did you notice the looks that Riker and Picard gave her when she said that? They're like, what?
Yeah, she looked, she stirred it up right there.
Mm-hmm. She's like, oh, it's right across the street from the Zanza Men's Palace, Dancing Palace or whatever. And Picard looked kind of sternly, and Riker was like, his eyebrows went up, and he was like, okay, can we go together next time? Hey.
And Riker was like, I thought I told you not to go there.
Yeah, maybe that's where she met Riker.
I don't know. Something happened there. I thought you were going to point out the real elephant in the room, which is that, Dr. Paul Mannheim was played by Larry Nemeczek. I was like totally taken back to see Larry in this episode.
Larry Nemeczek. Shout out to Larry Nemeczek, everybody. Go check him out on YouTube. He's got a great few shows there. You can find him, Dr. Trek. That's funny. But I did notice that I did mention earlier about Picard and Patrick Stewart's acting. And I just felt like when he was talking to that lady, Janice, which I was like, that's a weird coincidence. Denise Crosby leaves in the very next episode. They have someone named Janice. Coincidence? Theoretically, I don't know. But he did a great job of acting still in love with the lady in a little way. Like, he didn't say anything like that. There wasn't anything in any of the dialogue, but the look in his eye was telling you there's still that feeling there. There's still that longing. There's still that what if, right? I don't know if you noticed it, but I really felt like this was by far his most comfortable episode.
Yeah, I did like it. I think that one of the things he does a little bit, sometimes too much of, is having a tough exterior and being a little bit too tough. Like sometimes with Will Wheaton's character, he's just like, sometimes you're like, seriously, bro, calm down. Like, did you have your coffee this morning? Like, and sometimes even with Dr. Crusher, he's like that, where he's just a little bit too abrasive and, almost just like stern and strict and almost in a bad mood. And I think in this episode, he took off of that bad mood side of his presentation as captain and kind of showed a softer, kind of a little bit more vulnerability. In the cafe scene, when the guy was trying to ask him, what does he need? How can I help you? And he was just like, well, you don't have what I want. I thought that was, instead of being the abrasive captain, he was more of the reflective, contemplative, and even having a vulnerability, which he explained was fear. And I wrote that down in my notes, how the captain's biggest, let's say his Achilles heel, is his fear of being in a relationship with a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And he admits that in this episode. I thought, when he says, I was afraid, I thought that was a big moment for him to say that he was afraid, because he doesn't really admit fear in that kind of way.
Yeah. And this was also one of those missed connection episodes. It was like what are those, lost connections or missed connections? And this has had to have happened to everybody on the planet, where there was that missed moment, or multiple times, more likely.
Yeah, multiple times. Yeah.
And we all kind of look back at that person. Sometimes we look back for that whole day. We say, oh, we both reached for the same pineapple in the grocery store, and we both smiled, but I didn't say anything. I chickened out, or, there's those kind of things. And sometimes we think about it for the rest of our lives. And, talking about this, I'm sure everybody listening in can relate, can think back and be like, yes, so-and-so on that day, or that person, or whatever it happens to be. And so this was really cool that they touched on that very strongly. And that, he and she and Janice, they both had that feeling of like what might have been or what could have been. And I don't know, I just really liked it.
Yeah, I did too, but I thought it was even more than that, because, running into somebody at the grocery store and catching eyes and not following up on that is kind of like almost two ships that are passing, right?
Yeah,
So
that's the minor form of this. Yeah,
that's the minor form of this. This is actually an arranged meeting, and he stood her up, essentially. Yep. He just basically stood her up, and
he ghosted her.
There's actual fault and blame. It's his fault, and he didn't do the courageous thing that you would expect somebody of his stature and his leadership skill, which is to confront her and explain to her why he does not want to go forward, and that why he's fearful of engaging in taking the relationship farther. Mm-hmm. I mean, the real brave, courageous captain would not be afraid to even face that kind of scrutiny or whatever the consequences of that conversation would be. So that's his Achilles heel. He's admitting that he's fearful of love, And I think one of the big things that was revealed in this conversation, which I love the scene that he had with Janice, when she says, "Oh, life with me would have somehow made you ordinary," and that speaks to the narcissism that he has, essentially, that teaming up with somebody or being with somebody else would reduce his greatness as opposed to enhance his greatness. And that's his flawed perspective.
Mm-hmm. And back to the fear concept you were talking about, that's also relatable, and it's also nice to see the captain's flaws that aren't just like, oh, he hates kids, because that's more of like a joke or an eye roll thing, but the fear of commitment, or the fear of messing up his career, or just a childish fear of thinking he's this great special thing and that dating a woman would diminish that in some way. But all of that I felt was very relatable, because we are extremely imperfect beings. And it was good to see him not just being an imperfect being when he was younger, but he's still kind of there. He was still kind of carrying it and still kind of fuddling around with it, but at least he was a little bit more honest about it. I don't know. I just thought that it was really humanizing for him. And maybe that's why the role, in the dialogue, he was able to deliver it well. Maybe he's just more used to being a little bit flawed, a little bit vulnerable, rather than just some grumpy captain that's really one-dimensional and hates kids and goes when somebody gets too close to him. But yeah, so I really like that, and I found the entire episode to be extremely relatable, personally.
I agree. I thought it was well written. The vulnerabilities I like to see in him, because, like I said, sometimes his tough exterior doesn't exactly match situations.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, I thought him being vulnerable. There was a scene with Troy where she says, "Captain, I sense that you feel some type of way about it. You're holding on to something," and he's like, "Yes, please get to the point."
So good. He's just like, okay. Well, and this is something they could have used Troy. They're still feeling things out with Troy. Like I noticed she was still feeling out her accent. Like there was
the accent changed a little bit to me.
Yeah, in this particular episode,
I noticed her accent more than any time before.
Yes, like she wasn't, not just her British accent or whatever accent she was trying to add to it, but the way she pronounced words was a little bit different. Like that day, she just decided, you know what, I'm going to give it more of an accent. Or maybe the producer spoke to her and were like, can you, really, when you auditioned, you made a really good accent, but
it was almost like Arabic accent or something like that. It wasn't the British accent part.
Right.
It was something different.
It was thicker. It was in the pronunciation of words. And
it was
I remember
different than the way she's delivered it the entire season.
Yes. And it'll be hard to keep that up for 150 more episodes.
No, she's not going to be able to.
No way.
Not that accent. It was too difficult. But I noticed the same thing. But I did like the idea that, then they brought Troy over to Crusher, and she started to ask questions about, how do you feel about this? And I thought that was another good use of Troy, in an episode. Just like, okay, find a way to have her connecting with people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Crusher was the other one that, I was like, okay, cool. They can give her a little bit more. This is good stuff. But then I started kind of wondering, are they going to be able to keep it up, keep Crusher relevant in most episodes? And it's really just not possible. And that's part of the reason, what kind of chased off Denise as Tasha Yar is that every once in a while, you're going to get your moment to shine. Sometimes 1 or 2 scenes per episode, sometimes an entire episode. But a lot of times it's going to be someone else. And so when Crusher was having her moments, I kind of found myself thinking, now she's going to have 2 or 3 episodes where she's hardly used at all. You know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of a little bit here and there, and everybody gets their moments. Also, quick little thing. I noticed Data was not lit well. Maybe Brent Spiner was, but Data was not in one of the scenes. He was just like super bright, and with the other guys, and he was like glowing practically. And I don't know. It's just one little thing another thing that they've got to iron out is when they could light him fine, but when he's standing next to other people that don't have that shiny makeup, do they light it for him and then they look messed up, or do they light it for them and then he looks a little washed out? But that was just kind of an interesting.
Yeah, I thought Worf's makeup was not that good either. Again, it just stood out to me as being not good. It looked like something I could come up with for Halloween this year if I really put my mind to it.
Oh, did you notice when Picard first arrives at the Paris cafe, there was a man playing an instrument, and that instrument was like 4 bongs, basically. And he was just kind of like stroking them like this.
I'm listening.
So I was just like, they just had him stroking. It was like 4 bongs coming out of I think it was like a flat thing, and then 4 bong things coming out of it. And then he was just gently like caressing them. And they were like, right up, I don't know what was happening there, but the guy did a great job. He committed. He didn't say, this is weird, what's going on. He was just like, okay, you got it. Sensual caressing. You got it. I can do that.
Wait till you go to Zanziman's Dance Palace. You're going to see way more than that.
So
you know what I liked about the set really quickly was also I liked the when Data had to go into the laboratory and he was sent on the one-man team. The laboratory doors were basically like light bulbs, I would say. They were these 3 or 4 light bulbs on each side, and when the door opened, the light bulbs separated, and Data had to kind of slide in between them. But I just thought, as a design, it was a cool set design to have these light bulbs be the door. And I had never seen anything like that. I don't think I've ever seen anything since.
I haven't either.
And it was a cool set. It was just a very nice touch. I was like, wow, that you could have literally light bulbs be a door.
I noticed one thing also on that set that I was really impressed by, and I put in the notes, it was just that the set itself looked cool, but it also had a window with an outdoor, and they had like a nice little rocky outdoor. And I'm like, that's a nice touch because, to save money, they could just have no window and we wouldn't have even noticed it. But they add a window and a background over there, it just adds a little bit of production value. So I was noticing that too. So kudos to them, to the art department, for giving us something cool to look at. But it is time now, if you can believe it, for the home run of the day, everybody. This is it. Wait, is that even right set up? There it is. Cirroc, who gets the home run of the day today?
Oh, let's see. Home run of the day. I think I'm going to give it to Data. I like Data in this episode. He said some really cool stuff, and he was kind of the hero in some moments. And then to the writer, to Deborah Dean Davis, who was really ahead of her time in coming up with a lot of these concepts. I enjoyed her take on how she formulated the thought process for this episode. And it's crazy to me how a lot of themes that she set in place in this episode ended up becoming part of the canon.
Yeah, totally. And I'd like to second that halfway. Deborah and Hannah Louise Shear, who I believe wrote it together, because isn't it interesting that it takes a writing team of 2 women to give Picard his best moments and his softest moments and the dialogue that he could actually sink his teeth into. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that maybe they were writing something a little bit more relationship centric, a little bit more human, a little bit more flawed, a little softer. And the producers may not have realized this, but they kind of struck gold there, because it's like, look at that. It brought something out of Picard that we weren't seeing before. So hopefully they noticed that, and going forward, they'll realize what kind of an actor they are dealing with. We know that it takes a while for the writers to adjust to the actors. We know that obviously with Avery Brooks and others, but maybe they saw, oh, shoot, maybe we don't have to make them some boring one-dimensional grump. Maybe we could give them a little bit more. And so it's really cool that these ladies opened those doors. But let's give a special thanks to some special people that were also written by 2 ladies. Homer Frizzell, Dr. Marie Segal, Eve England out in Wales, Yvette Blackmon-Tom, TJ Jackson-Bey, Bill Victor Arukin, Titus Moeller, Darlena Marie, Dr. Mohammed Noor, Tierney C. Diekman, Anna Post, Anil O. Palat, Joe Balsarati, Mike Gu, DQ, Neil Akasaka, our pal Justine Norton-Kurtzen, Dr. Stephanie Baker, Carrie Schwent, Faith Howell, Edward Foltz, live from Tokyo, the Matt Boardman, Chris McGee, Justin Weir, Jake Barrett, Jane Jorgensen, Henry Unger, Allison Leach Hyde, Jed Thompson, Classic, Marcia Schreier, Brandon Gant, and of course, Dr. Susan V. Gruner and Jason Okun. Stick around, everybody. We've got the free-for-all up next. You're going to love it, and we'll be right back on the 7th Rule. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the 7th Rule. This is the free-for-all. Guess who joined us? Melissa Longo. Also, Allison Leach Hyde is here. We've got Gold Scott Jensen. Ooh, that is a virtual TrekCon shirt. That's an OG shirt right there. Eve England out in Wales, also wearing an OG 7th Rule shirt. Justin Weir is, he's wearing a naughty Oregon.
Speaking Jamaharan.
Sue, you're up next. Sue's also here. Oh, excellent. He's wearing her It's a Jake shirt. I love it. Jason Okun is also here with a radical background, as per usual. We've got the Dark Lord Chris McGee here. Carrie Schwent is wearing a cool 7th Rule self-sealing stem bolt shirt. That's a great color too, maroon. Mai is live in Tokyo, I'll just bet. And Matt Boardman is, what is that? Oh, I get it. That's from the when they're on the planet, right? Yep, there it is. All right, everybody, let's have some fun. Oh, was this the first time we actually saw Livingston the fish? I put in my notes, I think that was the first time we actually saw him. Maybe.
I don't know.
And this was also an episode where I noticed that they said some kind of or some sort of like 3 or 4 times. And I was thinking, we should keep track of that. We should, like that, because we're not getting a lot of non-appearance mentions, but maybe we're getting a lot of some kind ofs or some sort ofs or some type of. Anyway, Jake Sisko guesses the IMDb score.
We'll always have Paris. I thought this was about Tom Paris, but I think that's the wrong show, right?
That was Lower Decks.
Yeah, that's their version. Okay, so I would say this was about a 6.8, 6.7 or 8.
Does anybody else have any guesses that doesn't already know?
But I think Cirroc was generous.
Yeah, I was going to say 6.2, 6.5.
5.3.
Wow. I was going to say 2.
You almost slayed Allison with that one. Anybody else?
$1. I don't know.
$1.
$1.
That's so funny. It's a 6.5. 6.5.
Okay.
It didn't feel that bad to me. I expected it might be, but I thought it was cool. But we're going to find out why everybody thought that it was so terrible. No non-appearance mentions today. They don't have them very often on this show, I don't think. Did they mention Jack Crusher?
Mm-hmm.
Very good.
What about a numerous appearance mention? We had 3 of them at the end, right?
And we had an extra Data, Picard, and Riker at one point. So let's see. Jack Crusher. Very good. Melissa, would you like to get us started? What did you think about this particular episode, and why is everybody pooping on it?
I'm not sure. I mean, I didn't think it was that terrible, but that's maybe because in the beginning it got me wondering when Picard's in the cafe, what Paris might be like in the future. And so my brain started going different places. I was like, I wonder what all the cities in the world will look like in 300 years. And I wonder if there will be musicians playing musical instruments made out of bongs. And, and it got my imagination going. And I like that in this episode that we got a little bit more of Picard, and he felt more like a human being in this episode than he has maybe previously. And for me, it felt like he was the captain of the Enterprise, maybe for the first time. Maybe there was other times, but I really felt it in this episode. And so I liked that. I liked the scene between Troy and Crusher. Dr. Crusher is probably one of my favorite characters so far because she feels like a real... Sure. I guess she feels like a real person. Like to me, she feels like I could walk up and see Beverly and believe that she exists. And then lastly, I did find it odd that nobody is grieving Tasha Yar.
Absolutely agree.
It felt like they completely forgot that she was even there. So that's all.
Good point. Welcome to episodic television. Who knows if this episode was going to come out in episode 13 or something, and she would have been standing there instead of Worf. But yeah, good point. No mention of her whatsoever.
Except for in the credits.
Yeah, opening credits.
Right.
Really? Didn't see that. Good catch.
Maybe for her shoulder in that one shot, right?
Allison, what's up with you? What do you think of this episode?
It's a middling episode for me. Yes, Denise's arm is in the episode according to Memory Alpha.
Really?
About minute 23 when the transporter issues are happening. There's an arm behind Picard. That's her arm, apparently. So she got credited for an arm.
Do we know, was it because it was shot before, the episode was shot before she left?
That's what Memory Alpha said. Yeah, that it was shot before she left that one scene. Or at least that particular scene with her in it was shot before she left. Let's see. I like all the Casablanca references in this episode. That's fun. You know, anytime we can go to the Blue Parrot Cafe, I'll take it because I would love to go there. One of my favorite movies. So, and drinks are on Troy, so we should all go. I think she'd be really fun to go drink with, both the character and the actress. So those are, you know, there's some great lines in that episode. You know, I love the technique of a desperate man. I love that line. And it felt really 80s in the costuming and hair to me, especially in the cafe. Like it was a sign, like we are really in the 80s in that one. All the big poofy hair has somebody who has fairly poofy hair, you know, it's cool. And the costumes and a lot of sides. I didn't understand why Janice's side was out all the time in her costume, but you know, it is great to get more Picard. So I will take that because we want to know him. Mostly we've gotten stern Picard the whole time. So seeing him out of his element and having an emotional reaction to something was great. So that's my pluses for the episode.
All right. Great stuff. Thank you, Allison. Goldu Scott Jensen. Did you also want more Picard and more side something or other?
Maybe Picard in one of those shirts. But yeah, I think 6.5 is probably fair for this one here. I did like character building, like both Allison and Melissa had said. I particularly like how Deanna gets on him, like right there in the first scene. She's like, "Hold on, we need to talk." And she says, "You internalize a lot of crap." And boy, we would not have had Picard season 2 had she not been 100% correct about that. He internalizes everything. It was cool to see him kind of move forward. And I thought it was also a pretty cool soft sci-fi technique of having time loop problems while this guy's having a hard time letting go of a bit of his past. I thought that was really cool. He's literally going into the holodeck and then looping on this while there's 3 datas and them seeing themselves come into turbo lift. So yeah, I thought it was a quick little a cool enough bottle episode. If you're going to have filler, it's a perfect spot to fill it in, especially after the trauma we went through in the last episode and the stuff that's to come. So you need to take a breath every now and then. I like the question it also asks, you know, you have the old legendary James T. Kirk line, "No beach to walk on," and how the Starfleet captain can't be happy and married until, you know, Ben Sisko shows up and proves everybody wrong. But yeah, it's always a cool question to ask. Can you have a normal life and be a Starfleet captain? So yeah, that's still 6.5 is probably good.
You know, that scene with the 3 datas is also one of the very, very few times that Data uses a contraction. When they say, which one is the correct one? And he says, "Me, it's me," which was, there was also that one really strange thing where it started off on Picard, Data, and Riker going into the turbo lift, and the story is following them, and then it leaves them and follows their duplicates. And I've never seen that before in Star Trek, where it just goes from where these are the main characters, and then now their duplicates are the main characters. And then just followed them the rest of the way. That was really strange. But anyway, Eve England is out in Wales. What do you got for us? And why do you think this one's a 10?
It was interesting, actually, what Alison just said about there being a strike during this, because I think I came away from this just feeling it was a little bit flat and it just felt a little bit disjointed. So I liked the 2 plot lines, but they didn't seem to me to quite fit them together in the way that I was hoping for. And, you know, the last bit when you had, you know, Data saving the day, it just lacked that kind of sense of, I don't know, threat and urgency. It just all seemed to have been a bit too easy for them. And then on the Picard side, I mean, I know I do a lot of Picard bashing, but I just didn't think he came across very well. I was like, so, you know, that we start to hear more about his emotion, and he's basically stood this poor woman up rather than just talking to her. I was like, that's not the best characteristic to have for somebody who's, you know, going off into Starfleet, etc. So I don't know. I didn't think he came across that well, but it was interesting to see another side to him. And then just generally, the first scene when they're fencing just made me laugh, because James and I did a bit of fencing after the Olympics when they were trying to get everyone to try a new sport, and we did 10 weeks of saber fencing. So it just made me chuckle because I haven't thought about that for a long time. So yeah, it's all fun.
Are you a good fencer?
No, I was really terrible at it. I felt really claustrophobic in that mask as well, but it was fun and it was good exercise. So.
All right. Well, the fencing champion of 1988, 1989, and 2011, Justin Weir, is here. What's up, Justin? What do you think of this episode?
What's going on? We'll always have Paris. I like that we get to see a glimpse into Picard's love life. I think the science part was a cool idea, different dimensions and opening a door to the other side. But to be honest, this episode was boring. It just dragged on. Agreed with Eve. I never felt like there was a big threat or the stakes were high. Things that stood out. Oh, when Troy was said, I think you would prefer to discuss this in private. If someone can read my mind and says we should discuss this in private, I'm going to agree with them. And probably that's a ballsy move. You already talked about the instrument. I got my my futuristic instrument over there. When Beverly discovers Picard and Janice talking, that glare, if looks could kill. Wow. One line that really bothered me when she said, it was raining and you couldn't find a cab. How would that be a reference? Do they use cabs in the future? Like that threw me off. But I'm a big music lover. I love the Mamas and the Papas. This was the first time I discovered Michelle Phillips. That was her. I had no idea until this watch.
I didn't know it either.
I woke up in the middle of the night with an idea and I jotted this down. Ferengi ships are brown, but Starfleet's gray. All the shuttle pods are stored in docking bay. A drunken night with Morn. He has so much to say. Quark is always scheming. John Luke says engage. That's it. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
She co-wrote that song.
Yeah, I had no idea that was one of the Mamas and Papas that played.
The only living member left with us.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Susan V. Gruner is here as well. She enjoyed being serenaded. Thank you, Justin. Great stuff. What do you think of this episode? And great background.
Well, I agree with Eve in that it was severely disjointed. I can't believe that Picard ghosted her. And that really bothered me. It's a character flaw that you would properly say goodbye to somebody. Data also said, time flies when you're having fun. That's a contraction too. I picked up on that stuff right away, and I just forgot about that, I guess, when I originally watched it. And it's been a long time since I watched this episode. And I think that's about all I have to say about it. I thought it was disjointed.
Well, Sue, did you feel like Justin said, there was no cab? You know, that's kind of weird in the future. But isn't it also a little weird that when she said she wasn't able to get a hold of him, like there's no email, she can't text him. She's just like, it was impossible. I had no way to contact you.
I noticed things in this watch that I have never noticed before. I'm pretty sure that was I have not looked anywhere or read anything about this, but was that Brent Spiner that jumped? Didn't look like him. The whole thing and that all the medical instruments when Beverly is probing that guy with that like pencil-like thing, I thought, what the hell is that supposed to do? To help a guy who's in another dimension? It just was so bizarre. And I thought, God, Denise leaves and the show goes to hell for the next episode. That's the first thought that entered my mind.
It's going to be a rough next 150, am I right?
No, I love the show. I do. You end up loving it, but that first season.
Well, we also ended up loving Mai live in Tokyo. What's up, Mai? What'd you think of this episode?
I like the fact that Michelle Phillips is there. That was my era. Always a warm and fuzzy thing to see her there. So I like that. I thought the acting was actually pretty good for a lot of this. The trio at the beginning of Riker and Picard and Data trying to figure out what they're going to do. I thought that was a really good scene, well-acted scene, I thought. The transporter operator, though, with his "you're lucky to get back at all" sort of comment, that was wildly inappropriate, I thought. But I think that was more of a script issue. And it was the writer's strike, so we got to cut them a little slack on that. The baffle them with BS moment from Data with, so you found a dynamic energy source. That's a really easy thing to do. Walk over to any wall socket. Electricity is dynamic energy because the electrons are flowing and moving. So I thought that was a little bit, they should have checked with their science people on that one. It spoke to me moment, though. I think when Picard says to Janice, he says, am I that transparent? She says, only to me. That's really cool. That's a basis for a deeper trust, a good relationship, maybe his soulmate kind of level person. What I've found is one of the difficult steps in choosing to forward progress in your life rather than settling down. Sometimes, the two work hand in hand, but generally a lot of potential is redirected to family, etc. And so it's being a nomad requires a great deal of sacrifice in many instances. And I could sort of feel his pain on that one a lot, actually. I want that, but I have this. I like this too. What do I do? So I thought that was an interesting insight into his character. He was speaking to an important point in my life too. So I like that. And this picture, one thing I wondered, this is Paris. This is Paris here. And it's taken from a unique perspective. I think you can see Sacré-Cœur Montmartre in the background there. This is taken from the roof of Notre Dame when I climbed up to the top of there one day, way back when, 1985.
With the gargoyles.
Yeah, it was cool. Right up there on the roof, hanging onto the flag post kind of thing, smoking a cigarette, relaxing. So it was kind of cool. That's. I want to throw the picture of Paris in there because we always have Paris.
Good stuff. And you mentioned Chief Herbert. That was his first appearance. He has one other appearance. Season 2, episode 14. What was that one called? The Icarus Factor. So maybe Picard didn't much care for that comment, and that's why he only came back once. The Dark Lord, Chris McGee, is here. What is up, Chris? Did you enjoy this episode?
Despite it being a rather snoozer of an episode, yes, I did enjoy it, mostly because of the nostalgia factor, because after all, I saw these way back in the late 80s and early 90s, and so nothing can take that away from me. Nothing will degrade that, even seeing all the rough edges in the episode. One question I was wondering about, and I didn't see any answer to this on Memory Alpha, is did Patrick Stewart do his own fencing there, or was that a stunt double? Does anyone happen to know? Probably not. All right. Well, as has been already mentioned, I just found out right before this free-for-all that Michelle Phillips is the one from the Mamas and the Papas, which is fantastic. I love their music. So just like Justin and Ryan, I was very surprised about that. And she was 43 about the time this episode was in production. Wow. And man, she looks great for that age too. Incredible. How did Data know that which of his selves was the correct one, the one in the correct time zone or whatever you want to call it? Does he have some sort of unexplained insight into nonlinear time? Felt like that was a little bit of a plot hole that I wish was addressed in the script somewhere. He also mentioned that he patched the hole there. He didn't close it because closed means that it's permanent. Well, I can tell you right now, that door is not permanently closed behind me. So I don't know where he thinks that closed means it has to be permanent. Finally, of course, the quote of the episode. Unlike Allison, I had a little bit of trouble finding a good, memorable quote from this episode that really stuck with me throughout the years. But I do like one that really did speak to me. Kind of, I had picked up on it as well when Janice is speaking with Picard, and she says, "Life with me would have somehow made you ordinary." And I totally agree. That absolutely is why he did not show up at the cafe.
Sad. He ghosted her so hard. Yeah. Jason Okun is here. He's never ghosted anybody ever, even if they deserved it. What's up? What'd you think of this episode?
Absolutely. First of all, I agree with a lot of what's been said here. I think the episode is quite a bit clunky. For multiple reasons. And, as Allison said, to me, it seems permanently stuck in the 1980s in more sense than one. And if I were to go through all the nits, we'd be here all day. I have a whole list of these things that I, write down as I go through this. But there are some interesting things that I want to point out that this episode probably was the first of many in many different respects, other than just the fish. Here we have sort of the Stein loop kind of paradox as the first of many. Here we have a scientist who takes care of his work, doesn't take care of his, basically ignores his wife for the most part and puts her in danger. We see a lot of that happening. And, Cirroc, you'll remember Second Sight on DS9 is part of that sort of loop. You have things like that happening. Production-wise, I noticed a lot of things that were a little off. It's amazing. People talk about how good the sets were, and I think there certainly was some work done on them later on. But I don't know if you noticed when Patrick sits in this captain's chair and whacks himself with a towel. The whole thing was just weird, and his entire captain's chair wobbles left and right. I mean, he really was loose. He was kind of scary there. You're looking at it. The bio bed was loose. Everything seemed to be kind of loose. The sound was a bit off on the bridge. In the observation lounge scene when Picard is talking to Janice, I think music was missing. I mean, it was just a conversation. I think it could have used some sort of a score behind it to give it a little bit more sort of emotional impact. I think that was missing there. But again, we can be talking about these things for a long time, and the whole sentiment at the end when Manheim says to Picard, "Take care of her." I mean, what, she can't take care of herself? I mean, this is really sort of an outdated mentality. It kind of rubbed me the wrong way. It probably would have rubbed me the wrong way even back then. He just seems off right now. And I'll end with this. I mean, I think it is the first episode where Picard doesn't just say engage. He goes, engage.
Yeah.
First time he did that.
Mm-hmm. Jason Okun wearing a shirt that matches how he feels about this episode.
Absolutely.
Straight up there. Carrie Schwent is also here. What's up, Carrie? How are you today? What do you think of this one?
I'm good. It's an okay episode. It's not the best, but I don't hate it, so I wouldn't skip it. It would probably just be kind of in the background. I love the look at Paris. That's been on my sort of travel bucket list for a while. Eventually, Eric and I will get to it. We're sort of working our way around with the trips that we take. There were a few things I did like. A couple things I thought were a little bit inappropriate. I'll tease that as to save that for the other things. I'll focus on the things I liked. Michelle Phillips, I grew up with seeing her on Knots Landing. My mom was and she loved Knots Landing. She loved Dallas, Falcon Crest, all of those nighttime soap operas that were popular at the time. So that's where I know her from. And I knew Dr. Manheim looked familiar, and IMD reminded me that he played Sigmund Freud in the first Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, and he is hysterical in that movie. And the other things that I like, I'm a background watcher, like the background extras.
Did you notice the guy that stumbled on the bridge towards the beginning of the episode?
Him I didn't notice, but in the very final scene, if you're watching like the background, the wall towards the ready room side of things, there's a woman standing there with a pad, and she's looking at LeVar and does not look down and start walking until he starts pushing buttons. I reminded about 3 times to double check. She's looking at him, and then she looks down and starts walking.
It's like they forgot to say background, and then they rolled
exactly
to start her further back. They should have started her further back, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
That's so funny.
There were a few things I did like about Data. Poor Data, holy deja vu, Batman. This is the second time that lasers have tried to kill him, and he's got to roll and dodge away from him, the poor thing. To answer Chris's question, I just thought of this about how did he know which one was the right one? He's got like his own sort of internal like chronometer or whatever you call it. I think that's why he asked Geordi for the countdown, because then the echoes, I think, told him when to do it. That's my theory on that.
It's a good theory.
In any case, I kind of want to know what bodily function Data was going to describe the phenomenon as, because he said it wasn't a hiccup, and he was getting ready to say what it was, and then poor thing got cut off.
What do you think it was?
I'm not sure. I spent enough time. It took me long enough trying to come up with the limerick for the episode that I forgot to go back and think about that. So, you guys have any ideas?
Shart.
I'm all for it.
It was a shart, Cirroc?
The shart.
What? I don't understand.
Man.
What is that? Is that
bodily function?
Plumbing new depth. Wow.
And it did look kind of cheap, but I kind of dug the doorway that was made of fluorescent tubes, like fluorescent bulb tubes, but that were sort of turned blue. I thought that was kind of a neat way to use a cheap effect, but I'm easily amused. We all know this. My husband knows this. He teases me about it all the time. But to finish off, I've in trying to think about what kind of limerick or what kind of subject to focus on for the limerick, I just, it's all about time. Data's musing about time. The contraction thing, he was repeating a phrase, so it wasn't actually him saying the contraction. He was repeating the phrase. But here we go. For most, time is a relative thing. There are times when it crawls and times when it zings, but the nature of time is not easily defined. Therefore, enjoy every moment life brings. Here endeth the lesson.
All right, great stuff. Thank you so much, Carrie. Matt Boardman is here to tell you all why you are wrong about this episode, and it's really a top 10. What do you say, Matt?
Well, I don't know, maybe top 10 of the bottom 10. But no, I actually, there's aspects of this episode that I like. I mean, it is in terms of like the overall story, it's not the most exciting, but there are things like, I don't know, like I look at the whole relationship that he had with Janice, and I mean, we're going to learn more about Picard as the season goes on. And so him ghosting her is not out of character for who Picard was at that time. I mean, the Picard that we see now, the Captain Picard is a much different character than Cadet Picard or Lieutenant Picard. I mean, there's a journey that this character went on that we're seeing at this particular moment in his life, that this is who he is now. But we're going to learn that he was a much different person early on in his life. And so that to me was not, I mean, knowing now what I do, that's not a shock to me that he ghosted her. And I don't know about anybody else. I've had there have been some relationships that have scared me, and I've never ghosted someone like that, but they're, at that age, I mean, who knows how intense their relationship was, and maybe, he got looking at this and went, holy crap, what am I getting myself into? And I mean, yeah, but it's never cool to ghost anybody. But they should have taught better manners at Starfleet. They probably did, Eve. He probably learned a few things when he was there. Well, no, that's not true, because we saw what happened when he graduated. So he definitely learned some lessons along the way. But but the other thing that I like about that too is like, I know that for myself in my life, I've had moments where, there's that one person that got away, and then later on in life, you meet up with that person and see that they've met somebody and they're happy, and you're happy for them. But, you remember those good times that you had with that person. So that's one aspect about this episode that I liked, was that, it was a very, in a way, it was a very mature way of handling seeing somebody that you had a relationship with and maybe didn't end on the best of terms, but now, as time has gone on, you've learned a few things and you can come back and handle it in a better way. And then also, just last thing, here we get another Ron Jones score, and I always enjoyed when they were in the cafe, we get the French accordion style music, which is always fun to me. I don't know why it's fun to me, but it does. It makes me giggle.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you, Mr. Matt Boardman. Great stuff. As always, Cirroc Lofton, do you have any final thoughts before we close the book on this 9.5 episode?
Yeah. First of all, I want to say that Denise got paid an arm and a leg to be in this episode. All right, I got one.
I need to look at it again to see this arm.
You and Ryan need a break. Oh my God.
I will also say that I think it's fitting that this episode started with Picard playing his sword, because he's always playing with his sword when it comes to the ladies, and I am disappointed by it. And the other thing I'll say is the idea of non-linear time that is talked about in this episode is actually the premise of the Deep Space Nine pilot, when the wormhole aliens are being explained about linear time by Sisko. So I thought that's another cool kind of parallel conceptually that they brought in early on in this show, because it is a theme that remains used throughout Star Trek, this idea of time and how it's used. But I instantly thought of, when they said non-linear time, I thought of myself in my baseball outfit asking Sisko to explain time to me, and him using baseball as a reference. So I thought that was another little clever thing to be inserted in this episode.
Mm-hmm. Check it out. There is Tasha Yar's arm.
But that's a
there it is.
dude's hand. It looks like a man's hand. Doesn't look like a woman's.
It's a man.
I think it's Denise Crosby. Yeah.
Is it?
Oh, really?
I mean, that's what they're saying. Yeah. That should be the.
Well, that's what her lawyer said when she got paid.
Yeah. They're like, "Who's that? We're not sure. It's Denise. Pay up."
It's Denise.
All right, everybody, thanks so much for joining us. Thank you to Melissa, Allison, Goldu Scott, Eve England, Justin Weir, Dr. Susan V. Gruner, My Live in Tokyo, Chris McGee, Jason Okun, Carrie Schwent, and Matt Boardman. For everybody at home, thank you for joining us. Boy, this was a great one. I was surprised at how much everybody's down on this one. I actually enjoyed it quite a bit. But thank you all for joining us. We will see you next time. And until then, always remember the 7th rule.